For strategic turn 1, you'd think the Chupacabras would start landing and immediately attack everywhere. I mean, this is an invasion, am I right? But the notable nobles specifically contracted a mercenary unit with a fast response time. In fact, they will arrive in strategic turn 2, and the Chupacabras are now aware of this. With limited time and strategic actions, the Chupacabras focused on ferrying their forces from transport ships to Port Easteridge. However, as you may have noticed, the very angry and betrayed Dale Guard accumulated forces to try to strike against the barely defended settlement of Thaumadrift, which is only being defended by one platoon of infantry and the HQ of the Murphy's Misfits. They hoped that the Chupacabras would withdraw and allow the security surveillance network to fall into their hands. But the Chupacabras immediately responded by sending a mech company to defend their newly purchased allies, and the Dale Guard ultimately called off their attack and withdrew from the battle. So strategic turn 1 ended with a lot of positioning but no combat. But since the Chupacabras' main force has arrived on Archer Sierra, let's discuss their strategy and objectives. The Chupacabras' orders are to destroy the 3 starports on the asteroid, thereby frustrating the Vesper March's exertion of authority over Roadside, while at the same time preserving the economic potential of the asteroid for possible future conquests by the Alyena Mercantile League. Vesper Marches wants a stable Roadside, either as an ally or a vassal state to act as a buffer zone between the Marches and Clan Hell's horses. By crippling Archer Sierra as a base for aerospace assets, Vesper Marches will need to divert resources to achieve their goal of a stable Roadside. Then perhaps Duke Brewer will be willing to quickly resolve the conflict in Bluehole so he can focus on Roadside. Therefore, the Chupacabra's strategy is to strike hard at Port Pyrobel and destroy it. Then they'll need to find an avenue of approach to strike Port Reaverwall. Once those 2 ports are destroyed, they can pull back their forces to Port Easteridge, destroy it, and then exit the system. With strategic turn 2 beginning, the grinning Top Hat troop transport ship arrived at Roadside's orbit. Colonel Nathan Kang, commander of the Task Force Black Sheep, assumed command of the Alliance. Now remember, you and I know the Chupacabra's objective and plan, but the Alliance does not. Their orders were to protect everything on the asteroid. But the player knows he can't defend everything, obviously, but he can centralize his forces at Port Reaverwall. From there, he can set up a perimeter defense at these 4 settlements. He'll be able to use his interior lines to defend and resupply his forces. However, his allies have stretched their forces around Pyrobel, so the Alliance commander lands a company of mechs there in order to help them withdraw back to his forces. Now, the Alliance is still concerned about the intel being collected by the surveillance network at Thaumadrift. He certainly doesn't want the enemy to know his force's disposition, but at the moment there's not much that could be done about it. Most of the Chupacabra forces have now deployed to the asteroid, and the player wanted to control the op tempo and keep it high, so he pushed an attack into Pyrobel. This is the Battle of Port Pyrobel. Welcome to Port Pyrobel, one of the 3 starports on Archer Sierra. The destruction of this starport happens to be part of the overall objectives for the Chupacabras, but first he wants to capture it, then use it to supply his army. You see, the Chupacabras can destroy this place as a strategic action or during combat. There is a juicy target on this battlefield. The HQ unit for Dale's Guard is located here. If the Chupacabras can destroy or capture this unit, the Chupacabras can steal the war chest points of Dale's Guard, while at the same time reduce the Alliance ability to efficiently make repairs. Capturing an HQ unit could potentially be a secret objective for the Chupacabras. Well, it's not, but the Alliance doesn't know it and they can't risk that, so here we are. Now, an HQ unit cannot just pick up and go. They need to gather their things, pack up their crayons, have a cup of coffee, and most importantly, use the potty before they hit the road. How quickly they can do this is a question of a roll of a die. I had the player roll a d3 plus 1. The rolled result would be the turn that the HQ unit can start to activate and drive off the battlefield. And the player rolled a 1. So starting on turn 2, the HQ unit can begin to activate. That was pretty lucky for the Alliance. We'll see how long that lasts. Now let's have a look at the forces, starting with the defending force, the Alliance. The Grinning Top Hat has deployed their first mech company to help cover the retreat of Dale's Guard. The first lance is a fire lance, comprised of 2 archers, a longbow, and a trebuchet. The 2 archers have the sniper special pilot ability. All the mech warriors have the skill of 4. The second lance is a medium battle lance with 4 hatchmans, and their skill level is 5. The third lance is a medium battle lance as well, comprised of 2 blackjacks, a shadowhawk, and a star slayer, all with skill 5. Dale's Guard has a heavy battle tank lance, comprised of 2 Shrek PPC tanks and 2 von Luckner tanks. The third light armor lance is half strength with 2 Galleon light battle tanks. A platoon of combat infantry is also available for the defense of Port Pyrobel. However, these are our homebrew infantry, which you can pick up a free infantry guide from our Patreon page. We designed our own infantry and infantry fighting vehicles for our campaigns, giving each unit niche capabilities so they have relevancy on the battlefield. For example, the combat infantry garrison at Port Pyrobel each come with 1 FPV drone attack, which can attack any vehicle or mech at medium or long range, with or without line of sight, as if the target was at short range. However, the drone is vulnerable to anti-missile systems and electronic countermeasures. The attackers are the Chupacabras who have deployed their first and second mech company. The first mech company's first lance is a heavy battle lance comprised of a Highlander, Blood Asp, a Grizzly, and a Warhawk. The second and third lance are both medium battle lances, comprised of a Marauder, a Rifleman, and 2 Centurions. However, the third lance, the Blue Marauder lance, is only skill 5. The second mech company has 2 heavy battle lances and 1 light battle lance. The fourth heavy battle lance has a Charger and 3 Grasshoppers. The fifth heavy battle lance has a Banshee, Devastator, a Bane, and a Quick Draw. The sixth light battle lance has a Fenris, a Locust 2C, a Panther, and a Jenner. And the skill for the light battle lance is also skill 5. The defenders will deploy in and around the settlement, while the attackers will approach from the south. Okay, I guess that covers everything, but we want to give a quick shout out to all our Patreon supporters. Thank you for your continued support. You guys rock. Get it? Rock? Because we're on the space rock? Funny, right? No? Alright. The Alliance won initiative, so the Chupacabras will move and shoot first. The player activates his first heavy battle lance of the first mech company. The lance ground moves onto the battlefield. The Alliance wants to see how the Chupacabras will deploy, so he's biding his time. He activates his infantry platoon, and they all stand still. The Chupacabras activate the red Marauder lance, and they ground move right next to its sister lance. The Alliance then activates his Hatchman lance, and they shift in cover to keep their TMM up. The Chupacabras activate their blue Marauder lance, and they sprint into cover. They will not be able to shoot this turn, but maybe in the next turn they will be able to get a good shooting position. The Alliance player activates their tank lance, which moves forward just a tad to get line of sight on the approaching mechs. The Chupacabras activate their 5th lance, who takes the southeastern part of the map. The Alliance can now activate a unit, but I want to remind you, the Alliance player is not wanting this battle. He doesn't want to risk his forces to defend a location that is not part of his grand strategy to win the campaign. However, the Chupacabras could potentially have the secret bonus objective to capture an Alliance HQ unit, so he feels obligated to defend the HQ unit as it prepares to escape. Therefore, he activates his fire lance and ground moves to a location to keep the egress route open for the HQ unit. The Chupacabras activate their light battle lance. The Panther sprints to cover, and the rest of the lance ground moves up the eastern flank. It appears to the Alliance player that the Chupacabras are trying to seize the east flank with their light battle lance, so they can try to cut off the HQ unit's escape or close with it and destroy it. So the Alliance player activates his Galleon tanks and moves in to intercept the lance. The Chupacabras activate their last heavy battle lance, and it takes the center position. With movement complete, we go into the shooting phase. The Chupacabras will shoot first, and they open up their shooting with the light lance trying to clear out those Galleon tanks. Target number was a 9, but only the Locust 2C hit, dealing 2 damage to the tank's armor. The tank needed to roll a motive check, and it passed. Next, the Charger and Grasshoppers open fire on the Hatchmen with a target number of 9, and they all missed. The Devastator lance and the red Marauder lance all take aim at one of the archers. Target number range between 7 and 10. Despite lucky points, Every shot missed. That's one lucky archer. The rest of the Chupacabras either have sprinted or didn't have line of sight, and therefore could not shoot this turn. The Alliance now returns fire. The Chupacabras may have blundered. The Devastator is out in the open with a lot of guns with line of sight. With the exception of the infantry and the Galleon tanks, the entire Alliance force opens fire on the Devastator. The target number ranged between 8 and 9. One archer, the trebuchet, and the longbow all hit at long range, dealing 8 damage. One hatchetman also hit, dealing an additional 3 damage, which caused critical damage to the Devastator's engine. The rest of the hatchman mechs and the heavy battle tanks all missed, which makes the Devastator pretty lucky too, because if those tanks hit, the Devastator would have been toast. The 2 galleons fire at the Locust, both hitting and dealing 2 damage to the Locust's armor. The infantry now take their shots, and they use the homebrew ability specific to combat infantry, FPV drones. The drones launch and buzz around the battlefield, then they line up their attack on the Locust and all hit, dealing 3 damage, which was enough to take out the Locust. This brings turn 1 to a close. The Chupacabras lost 1 mech and has 1 lucky Devastator. Both sides are exchanging fire but are rolling poorly and missing their shots. Luckily, the HQ unit has decided to skip the potty break and take their coffees in a to-go cup, so they'll be able to activate next turn. The Chupacabras won the initiative. The Alliance will need to move and shoot first, which is fortuitous since the player wants to activate the HQ unit and get them out of this battle. They sprint off the battlefield, leaving the battle in the rearview mirror. The Alliance player felt he achieved something, but we all know the Chupacabra player didn't have this objective, so oh well. But as for the starport, they do want to seize that. The Chupacabras activate their heavy battle lance. The Devastator, a little shell-shocked, turns around and sprints from the battlefield. The rest of the lance continues to advance towards the settlement. The Alliance can now activate a unit. For them, they have achieved their goal of covering the escape of the HQ unit. There is no reason to stay in the battle, except the player wants to try to take out a few Chupacabra mechs as he falls back. So he activates his fire lance and backs up towards his eventual escape route. The Chupacabras want to keep the pressure up and activates his red Marauder lance and ground moves forward. The Alliance activates their heavy battle tanks and also falls back, but wanting to maintain line of sight on the Chupacabras. The heavy battle lance of the Chupacabras is activated. The Charger charges and the Grasshoppers ground move right behind the Charger. The Alliance player realized that his hatchetmen were in a perfect position to finally close with the enemy and whack them with a hatchet. For some reason, it has become some sort of achievement for the first player who can do this. But if he did, his hatchmen would be left completely exposed and likely not be able to retreat from the battle. And he really wants to conserve his forces for future battles, so he resisted the urge and fell back. The Chupacabras activate their blue Marauder lance and advance up the western flank. The Alliance activates their last mech lance and pulls back as well. The Chupacabras activate their first heavy battle lance, and the Grizzly jumps to the top of the rock formation so it can have line of sight. The rest of the lance ground moves around the rock formation. For proportional movement, the Alliance must move their last 2 units. The infantry stands still again. The Galleon tanks sprint 18 inches to the rear, trying to put as much distance between themselves and the Chupacabras. The Chupacabras now activate their last lance, the light battle lance. The Fenris ground moves into cover at the edge of the settlement, and the Panther and Jenner jump to the top of the rock formation, spooking the poor little infantry guys up there. With movement complete, we go into the shooting phase. The Alliance will shoot first. All the hatchetmen open fire on the Fenris. The target number was an 11 due to the high TMM and cover, and despite using lucky points, they all missed. Next, the infantry, having expended all the FPV drones, switch to rocket launchers and they target the Panther on the rock. Target number ranged from 6 to an 8. 2 of the infantry squads were able to hit the Panther, stripping 2 points of armor from the mech. The heavy battle tank Lance takes aim at the Banshee and opens fire with a target number of 7. 1 Von Wagner and 1 Shrek tank hit, dealing 9 points of damage to the Banshee, completely removing the armor and dealing 1 structural point of damage, which caused critical damage to the mech's weapon. The Chupacabra player was in shock. These tanks pack a pretty mean punch. But the Alliance wasn't done with his shooting. The Fire Lance also took aim at the Banshee and opened fire. The target number for the longbow and trebuchet was a 9, and for the 2 sniper archers, the target number was a 7. Out of the 4 mechs, only the trebuchet missed, dealing 8 damage to the Banshee, which was more than enough to destroy the mech, though it can still shoot back this turn. And finally, the medium battle lance took aim at the blue Centurion. Target number was an 8. Using lucky points, the 2 blackjacks and the Shadowhawk hit, dealing 8 points of damage to the Centurion. This removed all the armor and damaged the structure, causing 2 critical checks. One was a weapon, and the other had no effect. The Chupacabras can now return fire. First, the Panther lines up the weapons on the infantry in the open, and, well, the infantry didn't make it. The Jenner, Fenris, and the Charger's Lance all fire at the Hatchman. Target number ranged between 8 and 9. Even with lucky points, only one Grasshopper and the Jenner was able to hit their target. The Grasshopper did 4 damage to the mech, but the Jenner rolled a 12 and scored a critical hit. So it did another 3 damage, which caused structural damage. Therefore, the Hatchman had to take 2 critical checks, which damaged its movement and its fire control. Well, the Chupacabra player had discovered the hard way that the heavy battle tanks sometimes hit harder than mechs, so the rest of his force take aim at all the tanks and open fire. The target number ranged between 7 to 9. Under all that withering fire, one tank was destroyed, and the other was severely damaged, with all the armor blown off and suffering 1 structural point damage, causing the critical damage to its weapon. However, it also had to take 2 motive checks, and it passed 1 but failed the second. This reduced its movement and TMM. With shooting complete, this brings turn 2 to a close. The Alliance lost an infantry squad and a von Luckner tank. The other tank is severely damaged, and a Hatchman is looking pretty banged up too. The Chupacabras lost a very valuable mech, and a Centurion is barely holding itself together. Let's get into turn 3. Before we get into turn 3, let's take a quick tactical pause so you can visualize what was going through the Alliance player's mind. The Chupacabras are located here, Delgard is here, and Top Hat are here. The Chupacabra strategy is pretty clear. Continue to advance on the settlement, shoot at any available targets, win the battle. Now, the Alliance player's strategy has changed from defending everything to defend only a few settlements, which this settlement is unfortunately not one of them. Now that the HQ unit has escaped, the Alliance player has no reason to stay here, but he wants to try to destroy a few more Chupacabra mechs if he can. In fact, severely damaging mechs is also an acceptable outcome, because the Chupacabras will need to use strategic actions to make repairs, using up their time and resources, which will slow down their invasion. So the Alliance wants to stay on the map for one more turn of shooting, but he wants the Chupacabras to think he's in full retreat. This way he can pull the Chupacabras in, use rock formations to break line of sight, and then use indirect fire to try to take down a mech or 2. Well, that's his plan. Let's see if Murphy has anything to say about it. The Alliance won initiative. The Chupacabras will need to move and shoot first. The Chupacabras activate their blue Marauder Lance, and they continue to advance on the western flank. The Alliance wants to embolden the Chupacabras by appearing that he's in full retreat, so he sprints his Blackjack Lance off the map, hoping that this will make the Chupacabras reckless. Which it may have worked, or maybe not, because the Charger and the Grasshoppers advance forward, pursuing the Hatchetmen. The Alliance, trying to buy time, activates his infantry platoon and has them stand still. The Chupacabras activate their light battle lance. The Fenris stands still, the Jenner jumps forward, and the damaged Panther jumps into cover to break line of sight. So far, the Chupacabras are pretty convinced that the Alliance was retreating, but now the Alliance reveals that in fact, he's turning to fight. The Hatchmen didn't sprint off the battlefield. Instead, they ground move into cover. This gave the Chupacabras pause. He starts to be more cautious, so he activates his quick draw and jumps into cover. The Bane also ground moves into cover. The Alliance activates his Galleon tanks, and they stand still, so they have improved shooting. Fully realizing something's up, the Chupacabra player has his heavy battle lance ground move. Hey, no pushing, guys! They form a fire line, with the Grizzly jumping down to rejoin his lance. Next, the heavy battle tanks activate and try to move back behind the rock formations so they can break line of sight with the approaching Chupacabras, while at the same time lining up their sights on the Charger across the map. The Chupacabras activate their last lance, the Red Marauder Lance, and they ground move forward, fanning out to form a firing line. The Alliance activates his Fire Lance, and they ground move back, trying to tuck themselves into cover and break line of sight. With movement complete, we go into the shooting phase. The Chupacabras will shoot first. Unfortunately, the Alliance didn't provide many targets for the Chupacabras. But the Bane could still see the heavily damaged von Luckner tank and opened fire with a target number of 6, and he nailed it, dealing enough damage to destroy the tank. The Chupacabra player then decided to have his light battle lance and the quick draw to focus fire on the damaged hatchetman. The target number was between 8 and 11. The Jenner and the quick draw missed, despite using lucky points, but the Fenris hit, dealing 2 damage, which was enough to destroy the Mac. The Charger and Grasshoppers then opened fire on one of the other hatchmen in cover. The target number was a 9. Using up the last of their lucky points, 2 Grasshoppers and the Charger hit, dealing 10 damage, which was enough to destroy the hatchman. The Chupacabra player began to lament not bringing infantry. You see, Daleguard has his infantry inside the buildings, and infantry could have attacked and cleared them from the building. But since he didn't bring his infantry, he will have to shoot at them from outside with his mechs, risking destroying the buildings. I mean, his objective is to destroy the starports, but he was planning on using the starport before he destroyed it. So he radioed back to his HQ to see if the starport would still be operational if those buildings were blown up. I, the GM, just shrugged my shoulders. I told him you won't know until after the battle when his soldiers are able to assess the damage. The Chupacabra player sighed and muttered again about not bringing infantry, and he opened fire on the buildings. The buildings were easy to hit, and again, the infantry didn't make it. The Alliance can now shoot back. All the mechs in the fire lance have an indirect fire of 2 each. One of the infantry squads successfully lights up one of the Grasshoppers with tag. The entire fire lance opens fire, and they all hit, dealing 8 damage to the mech. This removed all the armor and dealt 1 structure point of damage, but the critical damage had no effect. The hatchetmen and the infantry target the damaged Grasshopper and open fire with a target number of 8, and they also all hit, destroying the Grasshopper. The heavy battle tanks take aim at the Charger with a target number of 9. Fortunately for the Charger, only the von Luckner hit, but it still did 6 damage. That ripped off the armor and caused 3 structural damage, which critically damaged its weapons. To add insult to injury, the Galleon takes open fire on the Charger with a target number of 7. Only 1 hits, dealing 1 additional structure damage, which critically damaged the Charger's movement. This brings turn 3 to a close. The Alliance lost 2 infantry squads, 2 hatchetmen, and 1 von Luckner heavy battle tank. But it was able to take out a Grasshopper and severely damage the Charger. So I guess the Alliance plan wasn't as successful as he had hoped. However, the Chupacabras had to destroy a portion of the starport in order to remove the infantry from the battle, which may have rendered the starport inoperable. In turn 4, the battle basically came to an end, as the Alliance players successfully retreated from the battlefield. Well, except for the Shrek tanks. They had to sprint 2 turns to get off the map, so in turn 4 they were shot at and took some armor damage, but they escaped in turn 5. The Chupacabras have successfully seized another starport. The Alliance was able to cover the escape of the HQ unit while destroying 3 Chupacabra mechs and severely damaging 3 other mechs. However, this came at a cost to the Alliance. An entire platoon of infantry, 2 von Luckner tanks, and 2 hatchetmen were all destroyed. And don't forget that the starport was also captured. However, the Chupacabras needed to assess if the damage from the battle rendered the starport useless after losing 2 buildings. I had the player roll 2d6. A roll of 8 or higher meant that the starport's key infrastructure was intact and operational, and they rolled a 10. Port Pyrobel is still operational and now under the control of the Chupacabras. The Chupacabras have captured 2 out of the 3 starports they need to eventually destroy in order to have total victory. So far, their invasion seems to be going well. But the Alliance is nearly fully deployed on the asteroid. This means that there will be a whole battalion of enemy between the Chupacabras and their final objective, Port Reaverwall. Maybe it's a port too far. I hope you enjoyed the battle report. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the next battle.